Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Hercules and the Space Gods, we have Nick Curto and the Urantia book. Greetings and welcome, Nick. How are you?
Thank you, Hercules. Great to be with you. And we have an exciting program tonight. Really been looking forward to this.
As have I, and I'm here in the background if you need me. Enjoy the conversation. I know I certainly will.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So, as Hercules mentioned, this is the Urantia book with Nick Curto. I'm your host. I've been reading the Urantia book for over 35 years. I found it, or rather, maybe it found me, to be a little more precise. I was coming from a very Catholic background, and when I came from Massachusetts to live in New York City, I was very much sampling different spirituality callings and different religions because I wanted to know much more about it. One of my aunts on my Italian side was a nun in the Catholic Church and became a sister superior. That's a whole other story I'd like to share sometime. But the bottom line is, even when I was like 17, 18, I really thought of becoming a priest. And part of that was because Sister Cecilia, my aunt, was so wonderful on so many areas that I thought of her and the possibility of entering the priesthood, but I decided to go into the creative aspect of my life and go into design, graphic design, advertising, and theater. So I came to New York City with that in mind, and I started really aggressively pursuing friends who were of very different backgrounds, spirituality and religious wise. And I learned a great deal. It was a wonderful experience to do that. What a journey. And I ended up at one point in the Unitarian Church, or not too far from where I live. I can walk there. It's the All Souls Unitarian Church on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It's a very well-known church indeed, and a beautiful place. And I spent 2 years there. Almost every Sunday morning, if I was in Manhattan, I would go to the service there, and it was always interesting. They Unitarians read from very different spiritual books or other works that they feel merit reading. So there was a lot going on there every Sunday. And after 2 years of going there, on that particular Sunday morning, they did a service which was reading a lot of different texts of different books. And then the minister said, and for our last reading this Sunday morning, I'm going to read from the Urantia book. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Never, ever heard of that name, Urantia. And I thought perhaps it was Eastern Indian or something like that. Again, who knows? Well, he read 2 or 3 paragraphs from that book. And I'll tell you, I was totally amazed at what I was hearing. I've never heard anything ever like that. It was moving. It was spiritual. It was scientific. It was cutting edge. It had everything going for it, and I was absolutely astounded. And that's literally what happened. I was astounding at what I was hearing. What in the world is that book about? The Urantia book. And then after he read 2 or 3 paragraphs, he said, "Go in peace." And everybody filed out of this beautiful church. I stayed there for 20 minutes in the pew because I literally had to catch my breath. Seriously, I was like hit by a spiritual train of sorts. It was like, wow. And I thought, if you do anything, remember that very strange name. Urantia, Urantia. And I was saying that over in my mind as I walked back to my apartment. Literally, I looked it up. I found out more about it. And I had gone to an expo in Midtown Manhattan. And at the expo, there was a whole room devoted to spiritual callings. And I opened the door to that particular area of the expo that day. And in the very back of the room, it was a huge room, I saw a big sign that said, the Urantia book. Like a heat-seeking missile. I went right for it, and people were handing me brochures from other spiritual callings, other religions. Thank you, I'll be back. And I was taking all this information as I proceeded to go to the Urantia book table. And I got there, and there were about 3 or 4 people there that obviously were readers of the book. And I said, I just literally heard about this book very recently, and I want to know more about it. And one of the fellows there said, it would be our honor to tell you anything that we can about the book. And you should know that in a very short time, within 15 or 20 minutes, we're going to be on the big stage. It's the one time during the whole weekend when we get a chance for about a half an hour to be on the big stage and talk about the Urantia book. That's so they allotted us that time, and you happen to be here exactly at the right moment. So what we're suggesting is that you attend that coming right up, and then after come back with us, be at the table, and then we can answer whatever you have. I said, you've got a deal. So I went with them. They went on the stage. I sat probably close to the back, and then they started talking, and I felt so comfortable with all of them that I got up and I went to the first row, because I wanted to hear everything. I have a slight hearing problem, and I wanted to make sure I heard everything they were saying. Well, they went into what the book was about the different 4 sections of the book. They had me. They had me absolutely. I was just, oh my goodness, what in the world? And then it was over. I went back with them to the table, and God bless them, they must have answered 1,000 questions that I had. I was so aggressive. I couldn't stop saying, well, how about this? And what is that? And I went on and on with that. They were terrific. And they said, there's a study group in Manhattan, in the Chelsea area. Where are you? And I said, I'm on the Upper East Side, so it's no problem. I could take the subway there. And they said, well, here's the name. It was Robin and Helene Jorgensen, and they've had a fairly large group of Urantia book readers every Tuesday night. And I took that, I called them up. They said, please come down. You have a warm invitation to join us. And I did that for many, many years, at least maybe 20 or more. It was an amazing group of people. They had a lot of people there. They formed a circle with their chairs. It was a very large, beautiful, beautiful loft that they had on the ground floor. And they covered the book uh, a few times. It went from the beginning page to the end page. And it was such an amazing experience to be there and to be able to ask the questions. And also, everybody was reading one at a time from the book. And then we would stop. And if anybody had a question, which many times they did, they would try their best to answer that. And what an education it was. So I just wanted to give you a background about how I found the Urantia book, or how the Urantia book found me. And when I do interviews on my program, I always ask the question, how did you find the Urantia book? And Larry, it's so great to have you as my guest. This is part 2 of an interview, and I enjoyed so much your perspectives in part 1 about the Urantia book and the history of the book, and about your dad's amazing journey too at the very beginning. So welcome, sir.
Thank you. Yeah,
Absolute pleasure. And
yeah.
oh, there you
This,
go.
yeah, this
Excellent.
is
What a good cover, by the way. That's an amazingly good cover. The
well,
Urantia
this is
book.
this is the Uversa Press edition published by Urantia Book Fellowship,
Right.
and
Oh,
that
here you go.
yeah, it shows the names of the 4 parts of the book there. So yeah, so that's
It's a
one
beautiful
edition.
cover.
Yeah,
A beautiful
it's
cover, well designed, and that's the one
it
I
is.
have currently. I have that book.
Yeah. Yes, it's the 2-column edition with the paragraphs numbered and everything. So I really do like that,
Yeah,
and it has an index in the back too.
and that's available in bookstores, I believe, worldwide now.
Should be, yes.
And also, you can get it online. And one of the places is the fellowship, which is urantiabook.org. And then
Right.
that's another place that you can get the entire book. And I have to mention right now that that is an incredibly wonderfully done website. And not only can you read the book online for free, the whole book, but you can also listen to the book because
Mhm.
it's an amazing journey of people from the Urantia movement that read page per page into recording equipment, and the whole book is now recorded, so you can listen to the book also. I think that's, by the way, I have to say, Larry, I was so impressed that not only did they do that, but they started doing it in different languages, world
Yeah,
languages.
you're right.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe right now there's about 28 to translate world language audios of the book.
I don't know about the audios, but I know in print, I think it's a good 28 or 30 or more translations. I forget how many. And I believe the New York Society, didn't they help sponsor a translation in
Yes,
what language? Yeah. Was it
right,
Persian?
right. The New York Society. Now I'm a member of that, and I've been a member of that ever since I was a member of the study group. I very much enjoyed going to the society meetings. I've been the president twice, and I'm currently the outreach chair of the Urantia
Uh,
Society of Greater New York.
yeah.
And what a great group that is. Longtime readers. Oh my God. Well, you probably know. Uh,
Oh, I know a number of your readers, although sadly you've been losing a few over the years due to what we call graduation.
it was,
Yeah, graduation means going from this planet on to beginning um, your trek to paradise.
I was so fortunate to be a member of that group. I still am, of course. And when right early in the first few months I was in that the society, they have when they do their meetings every few months, they ask somebody ahead of time if they would put together a worship service.
Hmm.
And that worship service can be whatever they feel would be appropriate for perhaps a 20 minute, 25-minute worship service. And I went, well, that's incredible. And you mean the members of our group will be able, I said, yes. And so depending upon the background of each member, they would pick what to read, what music, if they wanted music, and I was incredibly impressed with that. And then a short, maybe 6 months or 8 months, they said, Nick, would you do our next worship service? And I went, boy, am I in the right group? Of course, I'd be honored, and I did. And it was a high point for me, knowing that the people who were in the society could all be part of the worship service and do them too. And I've done a number of them now all these years, and it's been a terrific journey just doing something like that. What an honor, and sometimes a very emotional response to the members of the society when someone does a worship service that really gets right to your heart itself and by what they're reading and even sometimes the music that they pick. Anyhow, it's just one of the high points of being a member of the Urantia Society of Greater New York. I'm sure that Larry, do you know do other societies also do the worship service like that?
Our society doesn't really, although maybe every once in a while we'll have a special retreat or something like that, and
Okay.
a certain worship aspect to it. But just as far as our regular study groups are concerned, well, my particular study group, or at least the one I'm involved with on Tuesday nights, will open with a prayer, but it all depends on what the occasion is and everything.
Of
I
course.
belong to the, yeah, I belong to it's the Grand Canyon Urantia Book Society, which means from the name you can probably tell I means I live in Arizona. I've been out here since 1973,
Wow.
and our society was established in 1990. And actually, Avi Dogim was then the chairman of what was then called the Charter Committee, and so he came out here and helped conduct the installation service. It was actually at a hotel not far from well, actually, I wasn't living in this townhouse then. I was in an apartment actually just across the street. Actually, all 51 and a half years I've lived here in Scottsdale, Arizona, I've been in this just within a 2 or 3 block area here. But and David and Marta Elders from Connecticut, and sadly they're both gone too now. David was then as I recall, he was the president of what was then called Urantia Brotherhood. Oh no, by then we were, that's right, the split had occurred. So we were the first society to be installed under our new name, the Urantia Book Fellowship. And
Fellowship.
so they stayed a night with me in my apartment, and David was actually our keynote speaker. So it was really nice to uh, have him there and everything. So yeah, it was wonderful ceremony.
Absolutely. It's one of the high points and for me to attend not only
Hmm.
the society but the worship service. I find, in fact, I just made a suggestion just recently last month that since we only meet, well, we do meet about every couple of months. I thought, growing up Catholic, we would go to church every Sunday morning. That was what we did, and my suggestion was, by now that we have Zoom, for most people who have the Zoom now that we can see and hear each other, my
Mhm.
suggestion was that we have a worship service at least once a month, even if we're not meeting face to face, because it's just something that helps, I think, all of us stay together and learn more about the Urantia book. And it's a beautiful, uplifting experience to have a worship service. So my suggestion was to do one at least once a month. And we'll see if they go along with that. But I just wanted to make that suggestion that I think it would be an added feature to our society to do something like that.
Yeah, actually, the interesting thing about your society, it's called the
The
Uran-
Rancher Society of Greater New York.
Greater New York. Yeah, you do have a lot of Jewish readers in the society, and but I know that a remembrance supper seems to combine both the Christian faith and I would say the Jewish faith. So I have an interesting story to tell you. I mean, about that, if you don't mind me. I think
Please.
it was in, let's see, it was 1993. Uh, what was then the Urantia Brotherhood held a conference up in Quebec. It wasn't in Montreal, it was some distance out of Montreal. And I know that a lot of your Jewish members of the society went, and they took along a lot of their Jewish friends who were non-readers of the book. And wouldn't you know that that particular conference, the worship service every morning, it opened with a very Christian based worship service, including hymns and everything. And Meredith Sprunger, Reverend Meredith Sprunger, who started reading the Urantia book very shortly after it was published, he said, finally, we're singing some hymns and everything. And he was quite elated. But you can probably ask Bobby Dreyer and Doreen Hain and oh, uh, um, there's another lady there whose name escapes me. But anyway, you can ask them how their friends reacted to that. I think it was perhaps a bit of a disappointment for them that it turned out to be that way. But it's just kind of funny how that worked out and everything.
One thing that was very interesting to me is that I've talked to now Urantia book readers that were atheists. They looked at
Oh,
what
yeah.
was out there and they said, you know what, it's just not clicking with me. I'm sorry, but it's just not my thing. It's not my thing. And they became yeah, I'm an atheist, you know, they said I'm an atheist, and then somehow that would be an interesting story too. They
Uh-huh,
heard or started reading something called the Urantia book,
uh-huh.
and now they're card-carrying members of the Urantia book. And isn't that interesting, though, that nothing clicked until this book came into their lives, and then things changed for them? Isn't that, I think that's an amazing story unto itself.
Well, yeah, I have found that quite true. I mean, it seems like the largest number of readers do come from a Catholic background. I believe you
Yeah,
said that was your
I'm right.
Yeah. But then you have people who, if they weren't atheists, they were at least agnostic. And, you know, maybe they wanted to believe in a God, but they just weren't sure what there was. But you even get a few people who came to it from believing in UFOs. So, you know, so it's just an interesting background. Actually, I myself was really raised in the Presbyterian Church.
Ah,
Al- yeah, although as you know, my dad, who is actually 50 years older than I, he had been involved with the Urantia Revelation actually from the very beginning, starting in the 1920s. But as far as our church involvement was concerned, it was a Presbyterian church. And I'll tell you something interesting about the church that we went to in Chicago, where I lived all through my grade school years. I think my dad chose that particular church because the minister had studied at McCormick Theological Seminary in Chicago, and his one of his teachers there was Dr. William S. Sadler, who, of course, as we know, was the really helped lead or bring about the Urantia Revelation and everything. So I think that's why Dad chose that particular church. And I did enjoy going to that church myself. Then we moved out to the suburbs after I finished grade school and just before I was to start high school. And this is something else interesting too. My parents were looking forward to attending the Community Presbyterian Church in Mount Prospect, a northwestern suburb of Chicago. And the minister of and the church didn't have its own building yet. It was meeting in the movie theater. And the minister of that church was Charles Rawson, who was a reader of the Urantia book. But sadly, the very weekend we moved out to, actually we moved to a nearby town called Prospect Heights, Charlie Rawson died. And so my folks were disappointed that they didn't get to see him as the minister of the church. But anyway, we started attending that church, and I was active in it. In fact, I was in the choir at least the first couple of years, and our choir director was Alvin Kulicki, who was a chemistry teacher at my high school, Arlington Heights High School, and he was a Urantia book reader, and eventually became president of the Brotherhood. His brother Alvin, no, no, this is Alvin Kulicki, Warren Kulicki. Warren was older. He had also been a president. Interesting thing about both of them, though, they both died during their terms. So Alvin's son David eventually got onto the general council. In fact, he and I were on the council at the same time. I think I might have asked him once. I said, "Are you ever going to run for president?" He says, "No, I don't think so." And I says, "Are you afraid of the Kulicki curse?" And
ah,
I don't know whether I really said that to him or not, but
makes a good story.
yeah, right. So, but and the Kulickis, as you perhaps know, they are one of the very longest running families in the movement. I'm pretty sure they were in even before my dad was, and my dad started in November of 1923. So
One
yeah,
thing that we just mentioned too that is interesting is that the strength of the membership of the readers of the Urantia book is that we're from such different backgrounds,
Uh-huh.
spiritually, religious-wise,
Yeah.
ethnically. That's the strength because diversity is everywhere in all the societies and all the study groups, and it's thrilling and it's wonderful and it unites us.
Hmm.
And that's a big deal. I think that's huge. That's part of the future, I think, of this book is the fact that uh, limitless boundaries, limitless love, limitless understanding. And that's part of what the Urantia book is all about, is
Right.
limitless love.
Yeah. It is interesting to see how so many African readers are coming on to the book.
Yes.
In Uganda and Nigeria and various countries like that. And it's just amazing. I really don't know of that many African American readers. There are some, and we can probably name some, but the first person I can think of, an African, a Black reader, he started he was in the Chicago area. I knew him along about 1957, 1958. Interesting thing about him, he was an extra in the movie. Um, uh, oh shoot, Place in the Sun. Is that the name of it? No, that's not.
What's name?
No, what's the? Oh, I wish
It
I
will
had
come.
trouble remembering. The Sidney Poitier movie. Uh, oh gosh, darn it! It takes place in Chicago, and he plays. It's about a Black family who finally decides to move to an all white neighborhood. What is the name of that movie?
I'm trying to think with you.
Um,
It probably will come to us right after we sign off of this program. That's
it
for
might
sure.
be, it might even be his Oscar-winning role. I'm not sure.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, I brought.
Hercules, if you happen to know that,
But
please.
anyway, this Black reader, and I can't remember his name either, but and he disappeared after a while. We lost track of him. But as I say, he's an extra in the movie, and there is a bar scene where he's sitting right next to Sidney Poitier. So
Oh, yeah, of course. Yes.
yeah, right. So
Amazing, amazing actor. Totally amazing. Um, there's a
Raisin in the Sun.
well, go ahead.
Raisin in the Sun. That's the name,
Oh, there you go. There
based
you
on
go. One of the
Lorraine,
classic, one of the big, big movies.
based on Lorraine Hansberry's play. Yeah,
Yeah, no, of course. Wow, amazing,
I'm sorry, I
amazing.
didn't think of it.
Um,
Shame on me.
there's so much, Larry, to talk about with you. I mean, we could do 10 programs, and I know that, and you know that too. It's your life, your background, that you were there at the right time, at the right place. That's interesting unto itself, and how you developed into a spot, into a communication, into the Urantia Society, all of that. And I have a lot of questions, but before we do that, if you will, give me if you can, just briefly, it's a huge story, of course, but it sounds, when I first heard it, like almost a sci-fi movie, that there was a communication from through a regular person about well beyond anything from our planet that came to them, that was there, and they embarked on communication. And in a very big picture sense, that's what happened with the Urantia book. And I don't want to go past that too quickly. And if you could, because a lot of people looking at this do not know about the Urantia book or how it came to be. Could you just give us just a bird's eye, a quick version of how in the world such a book would come to be? Where is it from? How did it happen? Could you give us just a brief one of that, please?
I'll try to be as brief as possible. I mentioned Dr. Sadler. He was a Chicago area psychiatrist, and along about 1906 or 1907, he became acquainted with this patient who seemed to be um, spiritual beings who claimed they were from other planets or celestial beings and so forth were speaking through him and so forth. And my understanding is for several years, it was just all verbal and everything. And then in 1924, 1924, on February 11th, actually, there two beings specifically, a Melchizedek and a being named ABC the first, and he's a midwear. They suggested to Dr. Sadler and his wife that that the Sadler start using this Sunday afternoon group that they'd been hosting for a year, and I really hadn't mentioned that. But they said that invite this group to start asking serious questions. Well, it still took several months for Dr. Sadler to actually mention that to the group, which my father had started attending in November of 23. Actually, it was a year later in December 24 that Dr. Sadler finally mentioned to the group about his longtime patient and what these particular beings had said the previous February. So they were, the forum was invited to ask questions, and I guess ultimately 181 questions were submitted, spiritual being value and so forth. And the answers to them slowly started coming through beginning in early 1925. And by November of that year, when the society, or the forum, it always broke from late April to early November. So by the time it resumed in November 1925, it really started coming through in the form of papers. And what we now know as early versions of the papers that were essentially in parts 1 and 2 and so forth like that. So I can mention some of the things that my dad mentions in his diary, like on November 1920, November 8th, 1925, the paper read was Attributes of God, or that was the subject. November 15th, Revelation of the Arrangement of the Universe. He doesn't mention what the subject was on the 22nd, but November 29th and December 6th, the Sons of God. And then, by 1926, they're getting into the third source and center, high personalities, spiritual artisans, ministering spirits at times. Names we now know are subjects in the Urantia book. And my understanding is that these papers came through over a series of years there up through about 1929. And then questions that were, as the papers were read and questions were asked by members of the forum, eventually they led to expansions of the papers. So maybe an early paper eventually was expanded into 2 or 3 papers, things like that. And so that's essentially how the papers came. And the papers are dated, at least parts 1, 2, and 3 are dated, I think 1934, 1935. Part 4, which is Life and Teachings of Jesus, that came all at once. It isn't dated, but we do know that it did come in 1935, really right almost after the end of part 3, because the forum began celebrating Jesus' birthday on August 21st of that year, 1935. And my dad, who was no longer living in Chicago at that time, he had several years before, he had moved to Arizona, but from time to time he was able to attend the Sunday meetings. Well, he was there that time. And so that's when he first really learned about part four and everything. So that gives you sort of a quick overview of how the papers developed. They
I have to share with you that the big story of this huge amount of data, of information,
uh,
that that is astounding. That's the only word I can think of. Astounding amount of data, of information that is so cutting edge, and it's coming through. They refer to that as the sleeping subject, I believe. Some people say the sleeping
yeah,
subject. So it was one person who, it wasn't from him, it was through him. And I
through.
understand that when he awoke from this amazing amount of information that was coming through him, that he was talking, that he would wake up and really not remember
Right.
or really care too much about it. It was kind of like, okay, what time do we eat? It's kind of like,
Yeah.
but that's so amazing. And maybe that's the reason they chose him, because he couldn't be the person identified with the information. It wasn't from him, it was through him.
Right.
And that alone is, I think, is extraordinary. And when I was listening to people speaking about how it came to be, one of the first things I thought of was, I'm in New York City, the Metropolitan uh, Opera is in Lincoln Center, and I thought just that scenario of higher beings giving us loving information, all kinds of information that is usable on so many subjects that we all want to know answers to, would be a profound book that could be done as an operetta.
Yeah, I remember you and I talking about the last time. So, well, who knows whether they'll ever material.
Can you imagine that, what it would be like to have a beautiful score, an operatic score, with the story of the amazing story of the Urantia book being formed and the people around? I just think that would be off the charts, one of the big hits of the Metropolitan Opera in New York City. I can't write opera. I do write some rock pop stuff. I've done some of the music videos, but
Yeah.
I think it really deserves an operatic with a chorus, an incredible, magnificent chorus when certain things happened and people are realizing what they are experiencing. To me, it writes itself. So for whatever, I just wanted to put that out there on the table, that I could easily see that becoming an extraordinary work of art.
Well, who knows whether that will ever happen. But something what you just mentioned, I know when I started reading the Urantia papers myself when I was just 15, and that was in 1954, actually more than a year before the book itself was actually published. The papers were available in pasted up galley forms, I guess you call them, something like that. So I myself started at part three, the history of Urantia. Um, but what I was going to say is that in my early years in the Urantia movement and so forth, I was sure that before the end of the century, there was going to be a Hollywood movie based on part four,
Yes.
the Urantia book. Well, it never really materialized, although I know some people have said that miniseries on TV, I think that came out either in the late 1990s or maybe the first decade of this century, called Jesus of Nazareth, I think was called. They said that that really kind of seems to follow some of the Urantia book teachings. There's also that series that was, I don't know, was it on Netflix or something? What was the name of that? The Chosen? That be the name of it or something like that? I'm not.
Yeah. Mel Gibson did a movie too, but it was the crucifixion of Jesus. And
Oh,
I
yeah,
wouldn't, I couldn't go to the movie because the last thing I wanted to see was the hurt uh,
yeah,
of that particular episode of that, what was going on in Jesus' life. I honestly couldn't handle it, so I never went.
I didn't see that movie either, and no, I'm sure Mel Gibson is not knowledgeable about the Urantia book. So,
Right,
uh,
right, right. You're mentioning part four, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's my favorite part of the book. I mean, it's an extraordinary book, chapter one, two, three, but four, the life and teachings of Jesus. Uh, I think it hits people, and it certainly did me, that this is the real deal. This is what it was like. It's like standing beside Jesus and the apostles and the other people in his family and knowing them and the way they were thinking and the way they were acting with each other. I've never come across anything that brought you into that intimate area of Jesus' life, like the part four. And
mhm.
I'm in study groups, and we're up to part four and reading it. Lots of times we have to stop because some of the people, and I will include myself, are teary-eyed,
Oh
teary
yeah.
because it's so emotionally uh, right in front of you, and it pulls you in, and this is how it was. This is the
Mhm.
real reality of Jesus' life. This is the problems. These are the joys. These are the issues that he was facing, and how he dealt with that. And it's extraordinary. I said to one person, this is my own experience, but the Bible, I'm familiar with the Bible and the life of Jesus, but the Urantia book, the difference is the Bible is doesn't have a soundtrack. It's just black and white on a small screen. The Urantia book is a cinemascope, a full sound, uh, extraordinary 3D movie because it gives you such depth. It gives you all the other parts of what was going on. And they said, that's a really interesting description of how you see it, but that really is the way I see part four.
Yeah. Let me read you just one sentence. Um, it's actually in paper 119, The Bestowals of Christ Michael, which is the last paper of part three. And it's section seven, the seventh and final bestowal. And this one sentence I find intriguing. It says, for a third of a century of Earth time, all eyes in all parts of this local universe were focused on Urantia. And to me, that almost sounds like all those other worlds in our local universe of Nebadon who were in on the circuits and so forth and weren't isolated like Urantia. It looks like they could watch the life of Jesus, almost like the Truman Show, if you know that movie, which is actually one of my all-time favorite movies. And I think it's just fascinating to think about that. So, I mean, who know? I mean, were they really watching Jesus' life, or actually, he was, growing up, he's really known as Joshua ben Joseph. Were they really watching it in real time? And maybe sometimes they'd watch it and he'd just be sleeping or he'd be cooking or I mean whatever and so forth. But say, oh, he just fell off the steps and so forth. Where was the guardian angel to protect him and things like that? And then oh, he's meeting with the the emperor of Rome and so forth, and that guy says, "Wish I had that kingly bearing." I think was that Claudius? I think he must have really been a Canadian or something like that. But anyway, so I mean, I just find that one paragraph very interesting. So
Absolutely.
it's
Absolutely.
something, yeah, it's something to speculate about, I guess. Maybe when we get to, may not be till we get to Salvington, maybe we'll get to, I wonder if we'll get to see the video of all of Jesus' life or something like that. So who
It
knows?
absolutely needs to be there because it really
Yeah.
gives you such a depth of understanding of what was really going on. And
Uh-huh.
it's extraordinary. I mean, the whole book is extraordinary, but part four has a special place in my heart, I think, with a lot of readers because it really brings you so close to Jesus' life
Mhm.
and philosophy and what he was dealing with as on so many levels too. So anyhow, I wanted to just make that comment. Um,
Mhm.
Larry, if you could just give me a moment and just answer this question. A lot of times I try to think of a within a very short few sentences, perhaps, or maybe a short paragraph, of telling people what they could find in the Urantia book that might be of interest to them. I'm sure you've been asked this a lot too, of if you
Yeah.
had to say that with a very short, how would you say to someone who doesn't know a thing about the Urantia book, this is what you will find in the Urantia book that you might consider?
Mhm. Well, I like to say that it's a book about God and the universe, life after death, what our destiny is, and also a very detailed history of our own planet, which is named Urantia. I find it nice to know that the celestial beings have a different name for our world than just Earth, which means dirt, really. Um, and to learn about previous divine interventions, you might say, or epical revelations that have occurred on this planet over the past half million years and everything. And then a very detailed life about Jesus. I mean, from the time he was born, and we learned about his childhood, and you learn about a trip to Rome and other parts of the Mediterranean world, and so that's really what I would say is what the Urantia book is about.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. It's an extraordinary work on
Mhm.
so many levels, and even though I'm sure you have read this book cover to cover many, many times, I have a few times with the study groups I've been with. And I had a study group of my own for a while too,
Yeah,
and when you're with people and you're reading this, it really just enlightens you. Sometimes it's breathtaking, and people say, "Can we stop a second? Because I really want to catch my breath, and I have a couple of questions I'd like to the group." But which is the good thing about being in a group that you can really bounce around some of the things you're reading and get
mhm,
other perspectives on what you're hearing, and it really enriches and helps when
yeah,
you're in a study group, especially. And now with Zoom, if you're in a place in a city, a town that doesn't have a study group, you can go to the website and you can find a study group that will do it by Zoom. And they'll
mhm,
allow you to be part of the study group. So you can just go to your computer, your laptop on a
yeah,
particular day at a particular time and become part of the study group. That's incredible.
yeah. Actually, the study group I've been involved in, most of the readers are local, but we have two people who are from New Mexico. There's a lady from um, the Portland, Oregon area, and most recently a gentleman from Fort Worth, Texas. So, oh, and then and I can think of another fellow who's from the Sacramento area. So, yeah, we have a few people from out of state.
Another chapter of communication, and we're using that now effectively, and I think the future is going to be that also. And um, there's so many questions, Larry. It's just such an amazing experience to have you there to be able to answer these questions. And there's so many questions. Now, I alluded, you were at the right place at the right time, so to speak, when things I would say exploded. I mean, it wasn't exploded, but it was like one thing led to the next. As in your average family, an average family, you had brothers and sisters. Well, how many?
I had just one older sister, uh,
Okay, okay.
about
And
six and a half years old than I.
and where was that then when you grow up in the family? Where was that
Well,
location?
it was in Chicago.
Oh, okay,
But
okay.
then my sister got married when I was in eighth grade, and then my parents and I moved out to the suburbs. And but yeah, I lived in Illinois for 24 years, and so all my education was in that state, including uh, grade school, high school, and college, and so forth. And
And
all four of us. My dad was in the forum the longest, of course. My mom was a long time holdout. My cat here is
That cat is very, very affectionate. It needs a lot of love, a lot of love.
Um, my mom was a long time holdout, and actually, my sister got into the farm first. Um, uh, Within a half year after she finished high school, and then she got her fiance in. And then my mom, she thought, well, I guess if it's good enough for my future son-in-law.
Sign me up. Sign me up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so she went in on Mother's Day, 1953, and then I started getting interested too. I don't know whether I'd actually heard the word Urantia yet, but I sort of had an idea of what was going on. And actually, as you probably know, I mean, I was raised on Urantia concepts. I mean, my dad raised me to believe that there was life on other planets and so forth. And so that I knew we weren't the only inhabited planet. But actually, Dr. Sadler, I guess, thought it was best that I hold off for a year, get familiar with high school before I did. So it was the beginning of my, or actually, right after I finished my freshman year, that oh, it looks like Hercules is coming on. He's
Oh
going to
yeah.
throw.
I should stop for a second. Uh, Larry, give us how a person who is looking at this and would want to contact you. Is there a way that they can do that?
Yeah, my email address.
Okay, could you just slowly, just say it slowly so they can get
Yeah,
it?
sure. Okay, it is a T as in Thomas, IGLATH 25. That's Tiglath 25 at gmail.com.
Easily enough. And if they want to ask me a question or have a comment or idea, I would welcome that, of course. I'm going to
Yeah.
give my email too, which is NICKNYNY, the number one, the numeral one at gmail.com, and they'll get me that way. And I
Yeah.
think that's great to be able to answer if people have particular questions or comments. So thank you for doing that. Um,
Yeah.
if you could just again say to people what they could find in the Urantia book that they would enrich their life, can you isolate a couple of things that very quickly that you feel as though this is in the book that you need to know about,
Uh,
particular?
well, as vast as the universe is, we are very close to God because there is essentially a fragment of God that dwells within us. You can call it the God within, or whatever. Your ancient book calls it the thought adjuster. That name is kind of startling to maybe some new readers, but when we acquire this God fragment along roughly around the age of 5, somewhere along there, that is the beginning of our soul. And so if we just essentially eventually learn to follow the leadings of our thought adjuster, and eventually we will fuse with that. Most likely not on this planet, but somewhere in the mansion worlds. Uh, we're we're together, and we'll be together all the rest of the way for eternity. So
Excellent.
as vast as the universe is, God is very close to each of us.
Excellent, excellent. One of the things that stands out in my own personal life is that when I was finding the Urantia book, or it was finding me, I was
Uh-huh.
losing very dear friends, young
Oh,
people that were dying from AIDS, were
yeah.
dying from cancer in a couple of cases. And the
Uh-huh.
hardest thing is, is to get through losing or having someone transition from this
Mhm.
life to what the Urantia calls your universal career. And they go into incredible detail about that. And that
That's right.
was incredibly comforting to me because it was such an issue and it was so hard to move when your best friend, when you're there when your best friend passes on and so
Mhm.
forth. And that was happening to me many times during that period of time. And the Urantia book meant so much to me that I could get more information about who we are and where we're going.
Right.
It really meant the world to me. I can't tell you. And so that's one little part of the answer of all that you can find, the treasury of information in this amazing, cutting edge, loving, loving book.
Mm-hmm.
Hercules, do we have another minute or?
Sure, you have 5 more minutes.
Okay, great. Larry, also, I want to ask you, sir, if perhaps in a few months or in the fall, we could do a part 3 with you. Is that possible?
Well, I guess so. I mean, don't know what else you want to talk about, but
A lot. There's a lot. And you were wonderfully at the beginning of this amazing chapter of world history of this amazing event happening, and your dad and your relatives and friends were getting swept into this amazing revelation. And you were slowly getting involved in it and taking step by careful step, I'm sure, to
Mhm.
I got to find out more, and then okay, can I come to something? And the answer was yes, eventually yes. And all that happened to you in your personal life, I would love to have a part 3 with very specifically that information.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm 85 and a half now,
God bless you.
actually I'm at this point I'm really about the only person left from certain occasions, like almost at the time the book was published, and then when the forum became the first society in June of 1956, and actually I was a founder of the Orbantan Society in June
Oh,
1961. And I read my diary just today to see who was there. And I think I'm the last surviving member of those
wow.
present. Now, there is Frank Scaraglino, who is still living. He was a member of the society, but he actually was not present that day. For all I know, he might have been still in the army. Do you know Frank at all? You may not.
Unfortunately, no.
Yeah, right. He's around my age, and I remember when he started attending what was then Al Leveren's study group. So I'm kind of the last person standing, and
That's
I'm
a responsibility too, isn't it? It's kind of a
well,
responsibility.
I have to behave myself, I guess.
No, but it is. It's a wonderful, but it's true though. And people can go for references and ask you what it was like. I mean, how wonderful that you're able to remember, and you have a great memory. I've seen some videos of you, and you really can put 2 and 2 together and come up with what happened 50 years ago and name names.
Well, I couldn't remember the name of the movie, Raised in the
Well,
Sun.
but what I'm saying, but you really do
Yeah,
have a great memory, and that's a
yeah.
gift too. So thank you so much, sir, for
Hey,
doing this interview. It was an honor for me to interview you. I really appreciate it. I hope sometime I can meet you in person.
well, we have met before, but
Right. But I mean, again,
yeah, right.
I,
Are
I
you,
would really love that.
going to be at summer seminar this year?
Not sure yet.
Yeah,
Not sure
right.
yet. But
Maybe it's
again, that would be somewhere. So anyhow, thank you so much for this amazing interview. And Hercules, I'll take it to you now.
Thank you both. That was a fascinating conversation, and I'm glad I had the honor of listening to it. And I wish you both well in all your endeavors, and including this one, the continuation of the show.
okay.
Thank you very much. Much
Yeah.
love to everyone out there. Much love to everyone everywhere, everywhere. Take care, guys.
Ditto
Uh,
what he said.